Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Subnet Show. I'm your host, Gabriel Cardona, and I am coming to you live from San Francisco today, although I have beautiful Tokyo in the background. I am joined, as always, by my amazing co-host, the man with the most cats in crypto, Connor Daly. What is up, my friend?
Not much. Happy to be here. You and I, we've been struggling the last few weeks. We've been kind of missing each other. We were able to meet up for the Trueflation podcast, but I was looking at our recent roll, and you and I have both been just kind of out one or the other for the last like month and a half or 2 months. So
Yeah, we've been doing
glad
ping pong. We've been doing the ping pong game.
yeah,
Yeah,
glad to
thanks
get a
for
chance to catch up. Yeah.
yeah, thanks for covering for me last week. So as he mentioned, I wasn't feeling too hot last week. Long story short, I had a tooth infection. I ended up having to have an emergency root canal, which, as you guys know, is awesome in every way. And so I ended up basically having to take some time off. I even had to cancel my in-person flight to Consensus and had to end up giving my presentation remotely. So the moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen, is to take care of your teeth. They certainly do a lot for you, and they've got to last you a long time. And until we have a breakthrough in gene therapy where we can regrow our teeth or something crazy like that, you got what you got. So take care of them. So yeah, we were supposed to have a guest today, and at the very last moment they were unable to make it. So we decided instead we were kind of just going to connect. Like he said, it's good to just connect with Connor after not talking to him in a couple of weeks. And then there were just a few different news items that we figured we would just maybe toss out the headline and then brainstorm on a little bit. I know that we have a hard stop in about half an hour, so this is going to be a somewhat shorter episode than usual. But as you know, as I said before, the show must go on, and we always want to do everything we can to push out fresh content every week. There's always something to talk about, of course. And like I said, it's nice to just connect with Connor. So I think the biggest things that have happened to me since I last saw you are obviously the tooth thing and not being able to go Consensus. Although I did still give my presentation at Consensus. So my presentation was an hour. And if anybody gives presentations out there, they know that an hour is a really long time. These days, it's hard to keep people's attention focused for that long. And it's just a lot of content to fill. Now, granted, I can talk about Avalanche forever, and I know Connor can too, but still just keeping people excited and focused for an hour is, somewhat of a task. So I gave a high level overview of Avalanche, not too dissimilar to other presentations I've given in the past. I've got a really good slide deck and a presentation I've been giving now that talks about our four, high-level selling points: Avalanche Consensus, and then the fact that we're a network of networks, and then subnets and virtual machines, which are sort of our four special sauces that we call blockchain 3.0. And so I gave an updated version of that presentation, but it went really well. I had multiple people reach out and was like, wow, that was a masterclass in Avalanche, somebody nicely said to me, which I thought was cool. And then I gave I was at the Graph Hackathon, I think 2 Sundays ago. Everything's moving so fast, but Jitten, I believe that's how you pronounce it. I could be wrong. One of our engineering project managers, who's absolutely awesome. He's also in the Bay Area. That was the first time I met him, but he said he learned some stuff from my presentation, which always feels good if somebody who actually works on this stuff in and out can learn something from your presentation. So that's pretty rad. So I wanted to kind of just talk about some stuff that had happened at the Graph Day. Not all of it is 100% Avalanche super specific, because of course the Graph works on multiple networks other than just Avalanche, but I thought it was kind of cool, and ultimately it will be beneficial to Avalanche. So there were a couple of things I wanted to talk about. The first, I wanted to tell kind of a funny story. So I live in the East Bay. Technically, I don't live in San Francisco. I live in the East Bay, but it's when I tell people I live in the East Bay, they don't know what I'm talking about. So I just say San Francisco or the Bay Area. And so I took an Uber in and out of the city each day to the Graph Hackathon. And the final Sunday, so I was there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I went each day, obviously, and then I was a judge on Sunday. And so the last day, no, it was Saturday. I'm getting my thoughts straight here. Yes, Saturday was when I gave my presentation. Sunday was when the judging was. So on Saturday, I left my house 2.5 hours before my presentation started. In my mind, I was like, 2.5 hours is surely enough time to get downtown, especially if I'm driving in an Uber, if I'm riding in an Uber. Well, of course, as you might imagine, it wasn't enough time. And so as I was sitting in the back of the Uber looking at my phone and it was giving me the Uber's ETA, it was slowly going from, I was going on at 4 p.m. And so it was like ETA 3:35, ETA 4:42, ETA 3:54. So finally I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm going to be late. And so I, fired up my computer, connected it to my phone, tried to send like a panic email to, the guy who was doing the stage hand stuff. I promise I'm on my way, man. It looks like I'm going to be maybe 5 or 10 minutes late, but I am in an Uber. I am on my way. I apologize, of course. I'm not trying to throw a wrench into the whole game plan. I suspected it might be okay because I was only going to be 5 or 10 minutes late. And we all know that usually things are 5 or 10 minutes behind schedule when it comes to, presentations and people talking, because people are long-winded like myself, or they don't stay on the time, either they don't respect their time slot. So I wasn't super panicky, but at the same time, I like to be super professional, especially if I'm representing Ava Labs in any way. I want to be on the up and up. And so even being 10 minutes late or something is like, nah, I'd rather be 10 minutes early, obviously. So like I said, we're pulling in downtown and it looks like I'm going to arrive at like 3:57 or something. So I was going to be right before. So we pull up, it's like 3:54. We pull up right outside of the Palace of Fine Arts, which is a beautiful, beautiful building and area in San Francisco. If anybody's ever been there, it's absolutely beautiful. One of the most beautiful places in the city. In fact, years ago, I saw two, I don't remember the years. I think it was 2010 and 2012. It might've been 09 and 11. I know there was a year between them where I saw Ray Kurzweil, who anybody who's heard me talks knows I'm a super Ray Kurzweil fanboy. He's the author of the Singularity is Near and a bunch of other, big singularitarians, big thinkers in the singularity space at the Singularity Summit at the Palace of Fine Arts. So I've been there a couple of times and heard some really, really cool presentations. Ben Goertzel, if you guys remember, he was a guest we had on the Subnet show, the big AI scientist. He was there. I saw him talk both years. That was the first time I saw him talk. So anyway, we pull up out front of the Palace of Fine Arts. It's like 3:57. I'm like, okay, no stress, get in there and do your thing. So I get out of the Uber, and if anybody's familiar with that area, in the front, there's a couple big trees, and there's like some grass and some dirt. It's not all concrete. It's like a little yard. And I don't know exactly what happened. I wasn't, over exaggerated running or anything, but I took off on a little trot to kind of, get in there and let him know I was there. And I took about 3 steps forward, and I tripped somehow. And I did a straight up, like I'm sliding into home base on my belly, arms in the air, feet off the ground, all of my weight on my belly, slid for like 4 or 5 feet in the dirt even. And I was wearing my black shirt with the white Nike swoosh and khaki pants. And while I was down, I tried to catch myself, and I took my phone and slammed it into the ground, right? So I'm laying on the ground. There's probably like 25 or 30 people standing in line all outside, smoking cigarettes, getting ready to go back in. Some of them were snickering. Some of them were like, oh my God, are you okay? And while I'm on the ground, I look over at my phone, and my phone is just completely shattered, like champion status. And I'm like, no way. And I could tell I cut my hand. It's healed up today, but I felt a little burn sensation on my hand. So I was like, real quick in my mind, this is what I thought. I was like, all right, man, you're cool. Just keep it cool. You got Apple Care on your phone. So even if there must be an Apple store nearby. Even if you have to buy a new phone, you'll get a new phone by the end of the day. So don't panic on that. Get up, dust yourself off, metaphor for life and failure, right? Get up, dust yourself off, go in there, give your presentation. It's all good. So believe it or not, I was able to keep my sense of calm and my centeredness. I actually was. So I got up, I dusted myself off. The security guard at the front gate was straight up laughing at me. I was like, I know, dude. I tried the best to get the dirt off of the white parts. I went in, and of course I was correct. There was still a lady giving her presentation on stage. So I technically was not late. She went till like 4:07 or something. So I had maybe 10 minutes. I go up there, I get mic'd up, the whole deal. I went on stage, I gave my presentation. The clicker was in my right hand, and I was super paranoid that people could see like a little bit of blood on my hand. Later, I was watching other people give presentations, and I don't think they would have been able to. So I think I was just self-conscious, but I was able to give my presentation. It actually went really well. Like I said afterwards, Jitten from our team said he learned something. So after coming off stage, if anybody gives presentations, they know, you're usually rushed by a few people who want to connect with you. So I, made sure to stay cordial and to communicate with every single person who came up to me. And then lastly, I was hanging out with Jitten and another dude from our team, and I was like, guys, I got to go to the Apple store. I totally broke my phone just now. So there's an Apple store about 0.6 miles away. And so I walked over there just to kind of, cool off and get my mind in a better state. And I get to the Apple store and I told him what's up. And of course, he's like, oh, yeah, you got Apple Care. It looks like you got Apple Care. Yeah, we can replace your screen. It'll take like 2 hours. I was like, okay, sweet. And he's like, before we do that, do you have the glass? If you guys know, there's like a glass, it's kind of like a plastic covering that goes on your phone, you can get or not. I do get it because I've broken phones in the past. And I was like, I do have that. And he's like, oh, okay, well, before we can replace the screen, I got to peel that off. And so he goes, shh, and he peeled it off, and my phone was completely perfect. Not a single scratch anywhere, not around the rim of it because of the phone case, and nothing on the screen. I'm talking absolutely perfect. I couldn't believe it. So instead of buying a new phone or even getting the screen replaced, I just replaced that glass thing for $40. So the moral of the story there is get that glass thing for your phone. It can save your life. It absolutely saved mine.
That is quite the story. I've done the same thing before, not with my phone, but with my watch. I have a reasonably expensive like running watch because I used to like run some marathons and stuff. And yeah, man, falls are hard, especially running falls. Those are the worst for me. I've had never any that are like so bad, but yeah, I had one a couple of years ago where I tripped on some uneven concrete, and then yeah, I like cracked my watch face, and then I like left knee hit, then left elbow, then left wrist, and I was like scraped up on all of those contact points. And I was like, yeah, I felt so sad because yeah, I like cracked up my watch screen, and then I got home and then I peeled off the screen protector and it was fine underneath. And I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's amazing. Mine even felt like glass. You know what I mean? Like I was
Yeah.
positive it broke. So whatever that glass
It's
material
the
is,
tempered glass protectors. Yeah, you got to go for the tempered glass.
yeah, it dropped like 40 bucks seems like a lot. It's worth it. Like my sister's like, you pay 40 bucks for a screen protector. I was like, better than paying another $1,000 for a new phone.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. The main thing that gets hurt is your ego, right? Like if I flip this switch and I see somebody fall in front of me, I don't like I ain't making fun of them. I'm checking if they're okay, right? So really it's your own ego saying, wow, I just bit the dust in front of 25 people and now I got to go on stage in front of them and act like I'm all cool and I know what's up. So
No, I don't know. Like maybe it would have been cooler if you gave your presentation just like your face like bleeding the whole time, just
sure.
like,
I
man,
could
these
have got some
Avalanche people
sympathy.
go hard.
I could have got some sympathy points. So the Graph Hackathon was really sweet. The whole weekend was sweet. Like I said, there's a couple announcements that they made. I wanted to just briefly touch on that will ultimately apply to Avalanche because Graph works on Avalanche, but presumably this works in all the ecosystems. So one of them is that they introduced something called substreams, and they're pitching it as massively faster indexing performance for subgraphs. And basically, it's like a data pipeline. What it reminded me of with the particular skills I have is the data pipeline that exists in MongoDB. If anybody out there has used MongoDB, there's this really tricked out data pipeline where you can ultimately massage and change data and then get, this custom output. And so there were 4 different selling points. There's extract via Firehose, transform via substreams and subgraphs, load to the Postgres database, and then query, serving queries to users. So extract, transform, load, and query. And I met Chloe, who was from our platform team there. That was the first time I met her. And then I met Jitten, like I said, the first time I met him, and we hung out all weekend, really got along. And he seemed actually very, very excited about this. He said, we do something internally sort of similar. We have this, our own like custom data pipeline where we massage some data. So he was saying, right out of the gate, this solves a problem that we're already trying to do internally. But of course, it has the benefit of being something that's standard across the community where ultimately there's going to be workflows and tutorials and development tooling and stuff that all grows around this. So from what I understand, and the people who know more than myself about subgraphs, about the graph, this substream seems like it's pretty exciting. Have you heard anything about that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have not. But yeah, I know that's I think a lot of people who don't do dev work don't necessarily understand some of the challenges with reading data from the chain and doing indexing essentially. And that's been, it's an incredibly tough challenge just because Geth, or the standard clients that most of these chains use, is very inefficiently designed for data storage. It's not designed for data retrieval. It's designed for coming to consensus decisions and storing blocks for longevity. It's not designed to quickly and efficiently determine what the state of the network was at this point in time for this particular smart contract value. And so if I want to know, what somebody's balance was historically, that is not necessarily something that's sustainable to do or fast to query. So you end up having to build these indexers and extraction layers that can take that data and put it in a more readable format. But oftentimes, like, the raw data is not what you need. You need a transformed version of that data. And this is something that the graph actually does pretty well, is that you want to basically, when you want to put data on chain, you want to put the least amount of data possible because you have to pay to store it. And so oftentimes you might want a derived quantity. So for example, you might want to know who made the most money or something like that. You might want to do that kind of query, like who has the highest USDC balance. That's not how it's stored. So you need your indexer. The indexer just stores a balance for each person. So you also need to do a transformation to do a sort on that, and to like know that you have different in database terms indexes on that data to be able to query it and sort it different ways. So yeah, it's cool that they're expanding their functionality, because I think there's not a lot of tools to do that. The graph has been one of the most flexible, and they've been able to put out a lot of stuff in their roadmap in the last couple of years. So yeah, it's exciting to see that they're continuing to build.
Yeah, super vibrant community. The auditorium was packed. I'm bad at guesstimating group sizes, so if anybody knows how many people fit in the auditorium there at the Palace of Fine Arts, maybe 1,000, give or take. But it was totally packed. I mean, like, every seat was packed. Super vibrant. Lots of teams. Who is their primary competitor? Is it Covalent? Who exactly is in this space?
It depends what you mean. So like, as far as like decentralized indexers, like they're probably the most advanced. But there's more. They're probably the most general purpose indexer. I've seen a couple other pitch decks for competitors. I don't remember any of the names off the top of my head. There are other indexers who do different things. Covalent is one. Covalent is not as interested in customizing queries per smart contract. I think they're much more like general indexes around like token balances, NFT ownership, and then some like well-known indexes for well-known contracts, like for like AMMs, for like Trader Joe and stuff like that, trying to capture that market. There's also, I did a panel at Avalanche Summit with a lady who is the CEO of a indexer whose name escapes me, unfortunately. But it was something like, damn, I can't remember. So really
No
sorry.
worries. Yeah, no worries. There's so many teams, so many projects. I'm sure they understand. There's a lot. Yes. So and then there was a couple more, and then I wanted to talk about our bounties. So there was Masari, if you guys know 2-Bit Idiot on Twitter, is its Twitter handle. Masari got 12.5 million grant. They're going to become the first core subgraph developer. And then Gitcoin, who's really awesome. If you guys know, I think it's a wiki. Is that what his Twitter handle is? Gitcoin announced a new round of grants for subgraphs. And what's really interesting is years ago, around the time, it would have been when before Ethereum went live. So this is probably 2014. I was on Kauai. This is one of the times I've spent 5 years total on Kauai, sort of in 1 or 2 year chunks. And this was one of those times I was there. And I actually had the same idea, which ultimately became Bitbox. I've mentioned in the previous episode how I had a startup called Bitbox that ended up at Bitcoin.com, which was, Bitcoin Cash developer tooling. I had that idea for years for Bitcoin, similar to what I'm even doing now, right? Cloud services and SDK and some documentation. And I had a little one-person startup. I've done many, the startup of one, I call it. I had a startup called Gitcoin. years ago, 2014 era, before even Ethereum was a thing. Obviously, it wasn't crazy successful. It's too early. I wasn't mature enough as an engineer. It wasn't the right idea at the right time. But yeah, it's cool to see that it's such a good name, Gitcoin. So anyway, they announced a new round of grants for subgraphs. And then the other one I thought was interesting is, I think you pronounce it Ludum Games. I apologize to the team if I'm mispronouncing that. They announced a new snark called shell proofs that are efficient and trust minimized, reducing data size by 10,000 x. And so there's a couple of interesting points I thought about this. Number one, with regards to the sort of substreams and what the problem the graph solves, as Connor said, sort of indexing this Web3 data. I know whenever we were in Berlin and Connor Chevley, not this amazing Connor, but since this Connor couldn't make it, the Connor who did make it gave a presentation on developing front end for Web3 projects. What's the difference between Web 2 and Web 3? And one of the things he mentioned was databases. Whenever you're doing a Web 2 project, you have a Postgres or MySQL or whatever, maybe you have a relational database or a non-relational database like NoSQL status or Mongo or whatever. But in Web 3, you just have the JSON RPC, which is incredibly horrible for doing any types of structured data. And so you have these projects like the Graph and the Covalent, et cetera, which solve that problem. And so I thought that was kind of interesting to piece it in like that. And then the other one, they were talking about us at the Graph event about this new kind of snark, sort of talking about how in the beginning of the web, before there was even HTTPS, nothing was super encrypted. Then for a while, encryption was even classed as like a type of arms. You maybe know more about this than myself, Connor, but there was a time when you literally could not export cryptography and guys were printing it on shirts. Do you sort of know the details on that?
Yeah, sure. So this goes back to my previous career in some export control law. So basically, the United States has a bunch of laws about exporting munitions to other countries and involving foreign nationals. So that it includes not only selling guns to foreigners, but also giving instructions on how to build guns to foreigners and things like that for anything that's classified as a munition. And I think in the 90s, they classified cryptography basically as a munition. So it falls under all of those amounts of export control. And all of those laws are actually still in place. And it is a bit of insanity of all these things that are totally open source and derivable math are technically illegal to be shared with foreigners. And so this goes down to a whole crazy section about laws that don't make sense, that aren't enforceable, and that are just selectively enforced to punish people randomly. But yeah, so it's an interesting kind of legal thing that if you do work in a more government oriented job where you have to be a little bit more careful and by the book about some of this stuff, that does still come up.
And didn't somebody print it on a shirt or something in order to get it across the border? Do you know that story? I believe one of the cryptographers.
I do not. I have not heard
Yeah,
that one.
they either printed it on a shirt or they printed it out in some way. There was some loophole where they were able to get around it by not transferring it in a digital medium or something. I'm sure if somebody Googles it, I'm positive that's the case, but I don't remember the fine details. I want to say somebody printed it on a T-shirt, and that was the way they were able to basically get it into a different country or something. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing where it's literally, the mathematics exist. They're kind of just fundamental. They're out there in like the ether of the universe, but somehow, there's laws around them. So anyway, so the final thought there was simply like, cryptography was sort of a munition and classified as such, but now due to the ubiquity of the web and online commerce and email, and then also national security reasons, cryptography is now something that's sort of part of our life, and HTTPS is pretty much ubiquitous. Especially after Firesheep, I believe, was the project that came out a few years ago, where people could just take over everybody's browser or take over their web session over HTTP. And so now it's kind of like it's in vogue and it's standard that people use HTTPS. And one of the people who was announcing this new kind of snark was saying that they anticipate something like that is going to happen with ZK snarks. So today they seem very exotic and they're very cutting edge, and most people don't know what they are. And even people who know what they are perhaps don't know the full picture of how it fits in and how it's going to affect everything. But they anticipate that it's going to end up being ubiquitous in the same way that HTTPS is ubiquitous, and especially with things like this. So a new kind of snark that has reduced the data size by 10,000x.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think the snark worlds, I think they're going to be very important when it comes to especially like some of the layer 2 roll up architectures, and just looking at ways to, these are all snarks are zero knowledge proof. So these are ways of proving something without revealing what the thing that you're trying to prove is necessarily. So that's a really weird way to talk about it. But basically, when we're talking about zero knowledge proofs, we're talking about things like, I want to prove to you that I know the solution to a Sudoku puzzle without showing you my solution. And there are mathematical ways to do that. Or for example, some other use cases are, I want to prove that I have a university degree, but I don't want to reveal what my name is or what college I went to, but I just want to be able to show you that if we're interacting online, I have this credential, but you don't know that, but that doesn't dox me when I show you that. Or there's some other ones that say, I want to tell you that I have at least a certain amount of money without revealing my bank account balance or something like that. And there are ways to do this. And so there's a lot of applications in crypto, and like, for example, Tornado Cash, that's another protocol that uses
Which Sherpa, it's entirely Tcrypt forking into Sherpa. We had them on the show.
Yeah, so we talked about that. I believe they use a zero knowledge proof to associate a deposit with a withdrawal, and you can't tell. And what you don't reveal there is which deposit is associated with which withdrawal, but you can tell that for this withdrawal there did exist a deposit that corresponded to it.
Yeah, I have said many times that, to me, the story of the Singularity is the story of the individual becoming asymmetrically empowered against the state. And that's a big thought. And just to briefly unpack that, because I know we're running short on time already, is just, as I perceive it, especially if you look at the big picture, if like we look at, tens of thousands of years of the human condition, and as the pace of change accelerates, and as technology becomes more and more advanced, individuals just become asymmetrically empowered. And you kind of get to the point where we are now in the story of humanity, and you see things like, let's presume that Satoshi is one person for a second. I'm not entirely sure he or she was, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Satoshi was it was a guy, right? One single person was able to unleash on the world an entire financial revolution, which has really changed a lot. And we're still in the very beginning of it. It's going to echo for generations, I'm sure of it. It's made tons of people fortunes. It's upended industries. And then he, for the sake of the argument, was able to basically just disappear off the screen, or off the scene. And a big part of that is, using cryptography, because he was asymmetrically empowered, sort of understanding how these tools empower one person to just make such a huge impact on the world. And so I sort of, that's the kind of the way I phrase it, is that the story of the Singularity is the story of the individual becoming asymmetrically empowered to the state. And I think this is kind of a good example of that. So I know we've only got 5 minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to bring up one other story this week that I wanted to cover.
Sure.
Which was Circle announced that they are creating a new stablecoin called Eurocoin, which is going to be a euro-backed stablecoin, fully reserved. Circle is the company behind USDC and Circle Pay, who I think are pretty clearly the best in the business at doing a fully collateralized stablecoin. So I'm really excited to see this. I think I'm actually really surprised that it took this long to happen, honestly, especially because I mean the U.S. dollar has dominance in international markets and stuff like that, but the rest of the world exists. The rest of the world, still might, if you're a European, you live your life in euros. I feel like so. And there's many other currencies that are going to eventually get their own stablecoin one day. And I think what'll be really interesting is, I think a lot of markets have not made it onto crypto natively, essentially. Like you can't trade stocks with crypto now. You kind of can with some derivative markets, but there's no, because of legal issues with securities and how those are regulated, we have not been able to bring these legacy markets on chain in a way that would be totally user empowering. But now, if we actually have multiple reliable stablecoins in various different foreign currencies, that actually could be the start of 4x and the trading of foreign currencies against each other actually moving on chain to be one of the fully integrating a legacy market in crypto, which I think is a really cool thing.
Yeah, USDC is actually my favorite stable. I don't know if you have a favorite stable, but it is mine. Tether has obviously been around forever, but I think everybody sort of knows the pros and cons of Tether at this point. And algorithmic stable coins, there's basket-backed stable coins, and there's algorithmic stable coins, and there's pros and cons to both. And then we've recently seen, the downsides of stable coins. But to me, stable coins, I think there's one of the critical cornerstone, or one of the critical puzzle pieces of crypto, because obviously I think crypto is amazing, but the volatility is something that merchants cannot really expose themselves to. If you're a merchant, the margins are so thin already on your profit that you can't have the asset that you're dealing with go up or down 10 or 20% by the end of the day. Sure, you'd like it to go up by 20%, but if it goes down by 20%, that could be the difference between you staying in business and going out of business very quickly. And so services like BitPay, which allow you to accept, crypto and immediately turn it into fiat in your bank account, are one part of the solution. But some people want to stay in crypto. They don't want to just go from, crypto to fiat in their bank account. And so stablecoins solve that problem. So, there's a lot of detractors and boohooers about stablecoins, but I've been a big fan of stablecoins for, most of the time. I like algorithmic, that's a tough one. I like algorithmic in theory, but it's a hard problem to solve. But backing them by a basket of assets can be gamed unless you have complete transparency, which not all of the companies do, as we've seen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me this week. We're going to have to wrap up. I got to run to a meeting, but
plug yourself. How can they find you? How can they find you?
Oh yeah. I can't believe I forgot that. Yeah. So yeah, if you like this episode, come follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at DAS_Connor, DAS_CONNOR.
Yep. And you can find me at CG Cardona, CGCARDONA. And as always, you guys rule. Thank you to everybody who's been part of the journey. We will see you guys next week, same time, same channel. So as we always say, from Snowflake to Avalanche, and through consensus to the stars. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.